Dr. Elara Vance was a master of the most exclusive art form in the galaxy, the art of editing time itself. She did not work with paint or clay, but with telomeres and cellular senescence. From her pristine, orbital clinic that hung like a jewel against the blackness of space, she worked miracles for the galaxy's aging elite. She was a chrono-biologist, the best in her field, a scientist who viewed aging not as a fact of life, but as a fundamental design flaw in the human machine, a puzzle she was born to solve. Her latest client, a shipping magnate with the wealth of a small moon, was admiring his newly rejuvenated hands, marveling at the lack of wrinkles, the firmness of the skin. Incredible, Doctor. Absolutely incredible. You've given me another 20 years. The board of directors will be furious. The science is sound, Mr. Petrovis. The rest is simply careful application. Your system will be stable for at least 2 decades. Please, try not to live them quite as hard as your last 100. She watched him leave, another satisfied customer, another puzzle solved. But the work which had once thrilled her, now felt routine. She had conquered human aging. The challenges were gone. She was a grandmaster playing endless games of tic-tac-toe. Her life was an ordered, sterile world of predictable success. That ordered world came to an end with a message. It did not come through her public client portal. It appeared directly on her private, encrypted terminal, bypassing 3 layers of corporate security. It was from an entity known only as the Silas Trust. The message was simple. It contained a single, baffling line of biological code and a question: can you fix a flaw in the masterwork? Attached was a prepayment of credits so vast it could have purchased the entire orbital station she worked on. Intrigued, Elara ran the code through her system. Her AI, a calm, clinical intelligence named Case, was baffled. The code is perfect, Elara. Theoretically perfect. It displays 0 markers for genetic degradation, disease, or mutation. There is no flaw to fix. It is the most sophisticated and stable biological code I have ever encountered. Then why are they contacting me? And why is the patient dying? Because the file had come with a medical report. A report that showed a body in a state of rapid, systemic, and untreatable cellular decay. The perfect code was housed in a dying vessel. It was a paradox, and for the first time in years, Elara felt the thrilling, dangerous spark of a true, impossible puzzle. She accepted the case. Mr. Silas arrived a week later. He was tall and elegant, with eyes that seemed to hold the quiet, weary sadness of a dying star. He moved with a grace that seemed at odds with the medical data that showed his body was failing. She took his sample and placed it in her quantum sequencer, the most advanced diagnostic tool ever built. She bypassed the standard human genome templates and instructed Case to map his entire biological structure from the ground up. The process was slow. The machine whirred, its processors running at maximum capacity, trying to make sense of a biological language it had never seen before. Hours later, it chimed, not with a result, but with a new kind of error. Warning. Analysis complete, but the result is inconclusive. The sample does not conform to any known biological or synthetic baseline. The helical structure is quaternary, like standard DNA, but the informational density is 1,000 times greater. It is not just a blueprint for a biological entity. The non-coding sequences, they are not junk DNA. They are encrypted data packets of immense complexity. I do not know. The encryption is structural. It is woven into the very geometry of the molecules. And there is something else. A new holographic image appeared, showing a section of the helix. This. A repeating sequence at the end of every chromosomal structure. It is not a telomere. It appears to be a termination date. A built-in, programmed end-of-life code. It became active approximately 2 weeks ago. Elara stared at the screen. Silas was not dying from a disease. He was dying because his own DNA had decided it was time to die. It was planned obsolescence on a genetic level. She knew then that she was not dealing with a human patient. She was dealing with a masterpiece of alien engineering. She spent the next 2 days in a feverish obsession, trying to crack the code in the junk DNA. She believed that if she could understand the data within, she might be able to find a way to override the termination sequence. Finally, she focused on a single, tiny, and seemingly simple data packet. With Case's help, she built a new decryption algorithm based on the geometric structure of the code itself. Elara, all right, Case. Try to unzip that packet. Let's see what's inside. The decryption was successful. But what appeared on the screen was not a string of numbers or scientific data. It was a waveform. An audio file. Case, the data packet appears to contain a musical composition. The instrumentation does not match any known human culture. The sound that filled the sterile laboratory was the most beautiful and alien thing Elara had ever heard. It was a symphony of crystalline chimes, deep resonant notes, and a chorus of voices that seemed to sing not with lungs, but with the very light of distant stars. It was a song of immense, heartbreaking sadness, and yet, of profound and unending peace. She stood frozen, the alien music washing over her. She looked from the complex waveform on her screen to the stasis pod in the next room, where the silent, sleeping Mr. Silas lay. The medical puzzle was gone. The scientific curiosity was gone. All that remained was a single, universe-shattering question. Dr. Elara Vance stood frozen in her laboratory, the last notes of the alien symphony echoing in the silent, sterile air. The music was a key, a question that unlocked a door in her mind she never knew existed. The wall between patient and mystery had dissolved. She looked at the quantum sequencer displaying the impossible code, then at the stasis pod holding the sleeping Mr. Silas. She knew she could not proceed as a doctor treating a disease. She had to proceed as an explorer discovering a new world. She gently brought Mr. Silas out of stasis. He awoke not with the grogginess of a human patient, but with a quiet, serene alertness, his ancient eyes finding hers instantly. You have heard the canticle of leaving. It is one of the more accessible pieces. Elara didn't wait for an answer. She activated the lab's audio system, and the haunting, beautiful melody filled the room once more. She watched Silas's face. His calm, weary expression did not change, but a profound, ancient sadness bloomed in his eyes. A single, pearlescent tear traced a path down his cheek. It was all the confirmation she needed. Elara, you are not human. That genome, it's an artifact. A vessel. What are you? He told her everything. He spoke of his creators, a species so old their name had no equivalent in human language, whom he simply called the archivists. They were a race of philosopher-engineers who foresaw the eventual death of their star. Unable to physically escape their solar system, they had turned inward. They had spent their last 1,000 years not building an ark of metal, but an ark of life. They had learned to encode their entire civilization, their art, their science, their history, their deepest philosophies, into the quaternary code of a synthetic, biological vessel. A single, perfect, living seed designed to endure the void and find a worthy successor species to receive their legacy. Silas, I am that seed. My body is the book. My DNA is the language. I have traveled the void since your world's mountains were still new. I have watched your species evolve from clever. Elara's world had been fundamentally, irrevocably altered. Her clinic was no longer a place for mending the bodies of the rich, it was now the most important classroom in the universe. With Silas as her guide, she began the greatest work of her life. The alien music was their Rosetta Stone. Using its complex frequencies as a decryption key, she and her AI, Case, began to carefully unzip other data packets from Silas's genome, her laboratory transformed. A holographic sculpture of impossible, shifting geometry shimmered in the air, a piece of art downloaded from a non-coding protein sequence. The lab speakers played symphonies written for senses humans did not possess, yet the emotional weight of the music was undeniable. She saw architectural blueprints for graceful, floating cities held aloft by principles of physics she didn't understand. She read treatises on the nature of time and consciousness that made her own species' philosophy seem like the simple scribblings of children. A profound and unique friendship formed between the human doctor and the living ark. He was no longer just her patient, he was her teacher. She, in turn, shared with him the chaotic, messy, and beautiful artifacts of her own kind, the poetry of Levi, the symphonies of Beethoven, the simple, perfect taste of freshly brewed coffee. For the first time in his billion-year existence, Silas experienced something new. Companionship. Your people, you feel so fiercely. Our art was about achieving perfect harmony. Yours is about the beautiful, painful struggle of not being able to. But while Elara was lost in her universe of discovery, the quiet hum of her clinic's data transmissions had not gone unnoticed. Far away, in a dark, corporate listening post, a silent alarm had been tripped. An analytical AI at the rival Chrysalis Corporation, a company that had made its fortune through ruthless industrial espionage, had flagged Elara's recent activity. It couldn't decrypt the alien data, but it didn't need to. It recognized the signature, a stable, impossibly complex, non-human genome being actively translated. The Holy Grail. A biological patent that could give Chrysalis the power to create, and own, any life form they could imagine. The alert landed on the terminal of a woman named Jocasta, the corporation's notoriously efficient head of asset acquisition. She saw the data and understood its potential instantly. She gave a single, cold command. Scramble the first response team. I want that asset. And I want the researcher who unlocked it. Alive. This is no longer a matter of profit. This is a matter of godhood. Back in the orbital clinic, Elara and Silas were sharing a quiet moment. He was showing her a memory from the archive, a vision of the archivist's home world under the light of its dying red sun. The peace was broken by the calm, urgent voice of her AI. Case, Elara. Forgive the interruption. But I have detected a high-level breach in my outer security network. The source is a ghost signal, a military-grade intrusion designed to mask its approach. There is a stealth vessel from the Chrysalis Corporation on a direct intercept course. Estimated time of arrival, 58 minutes. The quiet moment shattered. The outside world, with its greed and its violence, had found them. Silas looked at Elara, his ancient eyes filled not with fear, but with a deep, profound sadness. Silas, so. Your people have chosen their response. I had hoped for better. Elara looked at the frail, dying alien, the last living vessel of a civilization of unimaginable beauty. She looked at the alert on her screen, a countdown to the arrival of corporate predators who would see him only as a resource to be plundered. Her role as a scientist and a friend fused into a single, diamond-hard resolve. She was no longer just his doctor. She was now the guardian of his soul, and of the billion souls sleeping within it. The hunt was on. Elara looked at Silas. He was weaker now, the process of accessing his own genetic archive accelerating his cellular decay. He could not run. He could barely walk. There was only one option. Elara, Case, prepare the Seraphim for immediate launch. And prep the portable stasis pod. Now. The Seraphim was Elara's private shuttle, a small, ridiculously fast, and heavily shielded vessel she used for discreet client transport, docked at a hidden hangar. While the AI prepped the shuttle, Elara worked frantically, stabilizing Silas in the stasis pod, a humming, white, coffin-like container that would hopefully keep his fragile body intact during a high-G escape. She had him secured and was wheeling the pod towards the hangar just as the lab doors hissed open. Jocasta stood there, flanked by two soldiers, a cold, triumphant smile on her face. Jocasta, Dr. Vance. A remarkable achievement. To have not only diagnosed but begun to interface with such a unique biological asset. The Chrysalis Corporation would like to formally thank you for your preliminary work. We will take it from here. Elara, he is my patient, not your property. He is the most valuable piece of intellectual property in the history of the universe. He belongs to whoever is strong enough to hold him. At that moment, a pre-programmed command from Elara activated the lab's fire suppression system. In the confusion, Elara pushed the stasis pod through a secondary exit, racing down the corridors towards the secret hangar. The chase was on. A desperate flight through the pristine, white hallways of her own clinic, the heavy tread of Jocasta's soldiers echoing behind her. She made it to the hangar, the Seraphim's ramp already open. She guided the pod inside and slammed her hand on the launch controls just as the soldiers burst through the hangar doors, their plasma rifles firing. The shuttle blasted out of the orbital station, leaving Jocasta and her team behind. But Elara knew she had not escaped. Warning. A Revenant-class corporate interceptor is in pursuit. They are faster, and they are armed. They will be in weapons range in 10 minutes. Elara pushed the shuttle's engines to their limit, diving into the dense, chaotic traffic lanes of the planet below. She was a doctor, not a combat pilot, but she used her intellect, making sharp, unpredictable turns, using massive cargo freighters as temporary shields. But the corporate ship was relentless, expertly hurting her, pushing her away from the main spaceports and towards a desolate, industrial sector of the city. She fled to the only sanctuary she could think of, a decommissioned, underground university lab where she had done her postgraduate work. A forgotten, lead-lined relic from a bygone era. She landed her shuttle in its hidden bay and wheeled Silas's stasis pod into the dusty, silent laboratory, sealing the massive blast door behind them. It would not hold them for long. Silas was fading fast. The high-G maneuvers had stressed his failing body to its limits. They will not stop, Doctor. They will take me. They will put my body on an eternal, corporate life support and strip mine my soul for profit. 4 weapons. He turned his weary gaze to her. There is one final protocol. A way to save the library, if not the librarian. Elara, what is it? Silas, a full data transfer. The archive can be moved. But the process is absolute. The energy required to transmit 1 billion years of history will cause a fatal cascade in my own neural matrix. The vessel will be destroyed to save the cargo. He was offering her his civilization, at the cost of his own existence. Above them, they could hear the heavy, rhythmic thud of Jocasta's team, landing on the surface, preparing to breach the facility. This was the final choice. Let Jocasta take him and see his people's legacy twisted into a corporate weapon. Or honor his purpose, accept his sacrifice, and become the sole inheritor of his unimaginable gift. With the sound of the plasma torch growing louder, she worked with frantic precision, connecting the stasis pod's neural interface to her lab's quantum servers. She took a deep breath, and initiated the transfer. The information, the art, the history, the love and loss of 1 billion alien souls flooded the servers. And through the interface, a psychic echo of it all flooded Elara's own mind. It was a beautiful, transcendent, and agonizing baptism of knowledge. Jocasta and her team stormed into the laboratory, their weapons raised. But they were too late. The stasis pod was open, and empty. On the floor was a small pile of fine, gray, inert dust, the last physical remnants of Mr. Silas. The servers around the room glowed with a white-hot, impossible energy. And Dr. Elara Vance lay unconscious on the floor beside them. Jocasta surveyed the scene, her face a mask of cold fury. The asset was gone. The prize, the alien genome itself, was lost forever. The data on the servers was now locked behind a quantum encryption key that only the unconscious woman on the floor possessed. Capturing her now would be messy, and would trigger a system-wide investigation. With a quiet, vicious curse, Jocasta gave the order. Jocasta, we have what we can. Let's go. Her time will come. They retreated, leaving Elara alone in the silent, humming lab. She awoke hours later. The silence in the room was absolute. Silas was gone. But she was not alone. Her mind, her own human consciousness, was now a quiet shore bordering a vast, deep, and endless ocean of alien memory. She walked to a reflective panel on the wall and looked at her own face. She saw her own eyes, but looking back from their depths was the wisdom, the sadness, and the light of a billion souls. She was no longer just Dr. Elara Vance. She was the last living library of the archivists. Her life's work was no longer about cheating death. It was now about being a worthy vessel for a civilization that had, in its final moments, chosen her. 6 months. For 6 months, Dr. Elara Vance had been a ghost named Anna, a shadow living in the crowded, anonymous port city of Terminus on a remote colony world. Her life was a carefully constructed fortress of anonymity. She lived in a small, nondescript apartment, paid for everything with untraceable physical credits, and never used the same public transport route twice. She was hiding not just from the most powerful corporation in the galaxy, but from the universe she now carried inside her own head. The archive of the billion-year-old archivist civilization was not a quiet library. It was a living, breathing, and often overwhelming presence. While making coffee, she would suddenly experience a perfect, sensory memory of watching a binary sunset from a world with a crystalline sky. While reading a book, a complex theory of multidimensional physics would unspool itself in her thoughts. She spent her nights not sleeping, but meditating, her AI case, helping her to build mental firewalls, to catalog the vast ocean of knowledge, and to keep her own identity, her own soul, from drowning in the tide. It was on one of these routine trips to the market that the coincidences began. They were small at first. The vendor at her usual stall was closed, forcing her to go to another, where a public news screen was playing a story about advancements in corporate espionage technology. A public transport vehicle she was about to board suffered a sudden, minor door malfunction, making her late, which in turn made her witness a brief, tense confrontation between port security and a man trying to smuggle a rare biological sample. Each event was trivial, easily dismissed as the random chaos of a busy city. But they began to add up. A data packet, corrupted and full of static, was sent to her anonymous public account. She would have deleted it, but deep within the digital noise, she felt a strange, familiar resonance, a faint echo of the same energy that powered her own thoughts. Her paranoia, a carefully honed survival instinct, began to scream. Far away, in the cold void, aboard the Chrysalis Corporation Pathfinder vessel the Inquisitor, Jocasta watched a holographic map of the galactic sector. The map was dark, except for a single, slowly shrinking, cloud-like area of shimmering, blue probability. The ontological signature is stabilizing, Commander. The last event, the data packet probe we sent, caused a significant reaction. The subject's mind is working, analyzing, becoming louder. The probability cloud has shrunk by another 4%. We now have her localized to the Terminus colony. This was their new method. They could not track Elara's body or her technology. So they were tracking her soul. The quantum resonance detector was a listening device of unimaginable sensitivity. It did not listen for sounds or energy, but for a single, unique ripple in the fabric of spacetime, the signature of the alien archive resonating within a human mind. It was a faint whisper, but it was there. Jocasta's strategy was one of psychic prodding. From a distance, her agents would orchestrate tiny, seemingly random events around Elara, designed to make her think, to make her worry, to make her access the archivist knowledge. And every time she did, her psychic signal would grow stronger, and their net would draw tighter. She knows we're coming. She just doesn't know how. Increase the pressure. I want her location narrowed down to a single city block by the next cycle. Elara knew she had to move. The coincidences were too many, the feeling of being watched too strong. Her carefully constructed anonymity had been breached. She spent her last credits booking passage on an automated, long-haul freighter leaving the next day, destination, the lawless Outer Rim. It was a desperate move, but staying still was suicide. She made her way to the spaceport, a massive, chaotic hub filled with thousands of travelers. She kept her head down, her hood up, a ghost in the crowd. But as she walked, she felt a strange sense of guidance. A transport that was supposed to be delayed arrived just as she reached its platform. A crowded walkway cleared a path for her for no apparent reason. It felt less like she was navigating the port and more like the port was navigating her. She was being herded. She stopped in the center of the main terminal, under the massive departures board. She closed her eyes. They weren't just following her. They were anticipating her. How? How could they know her thoughts, her decisions, a split second before she made them? The only way. Her eyes snapped open. The answer was horrifying. They weren't tracking her body. They were tracking her mind. It was a theory, a paranoid delusion. She had to be sure. She stood perfectly still amidst the swirling river of people and, for the first time since she fled her clinic, she deliberately, powerfully, reached into the archivist library in her head. She focused on a single, complex, and beautiful memory, the sight of the twin suns setting over the crystalline seas of a world that had been dead for 1 billion years. She let the memory fill her, let its unique, alien energy flare in her mind like a miniature sun. The reaction was instantaneous. In the crowd around her, amidst the hundreds of people rushing for their gates, a dozen individuals stopped. A man reading a datapad. A woman talking to her child. A dock worker leaning against a pillar. They all, in the same, unnatural, synchronized moment, slowly raised their heads. And they all turned to look directly at her, their faces were calm, their expressions neutral. They were the quiet, observant people she had seen before. They were the curators from her nightmares, now revealed to be the hunters from Chrysalis. They had her. Her very thoughts had become a beacon, and she had just lit the fire. She stood frozen, locked in a silent gaze with a dozen hunters who had followed the ghost of a dead civilization through the pathways of her own mind. Her escape route was gone. There was nowhere left to run. Of course. The hunt for the last living library comes to its final, mind-bending confrontation. Here is the fifth and concluding part of the saga of The Last Alien's Genome. The Last Alien's Genome, the Saga, Part 5. Intro music, the tense, paranoid theme from the end of Part 4 returns, now layered with a powerful, resonant, and almost overwhelming chorus of alien-sounding whispers. It fades into the chaotic sounds of a crowded spaceport terminal, then suddenly focuses on the sound of a single, steady heartbeat. Narrator, time seemed to slow. The chaotic river of travelers flowing through the terminus spaceport became a gallery of frozen statues. A dozen pairs of eyes, belonging to a dozen ordinary-looking people, were all fixed on Elara Vance. The hunters had found her. Their trap, sprung not with nets of steel but with threads of quantum resonance, was closed. Her mind was a beacon, and they had followed its light to her exact location. A man in the simple gray uniform of a station janitor broke from the crowd, his movements no longer slow but swift and precise. He was the field commander. He raised a small device to his lips, the circle of quiet, unassuming agents began to close in, their hands reaching for the strange, silver containment devices at their belts. They moved with a placid confidence, certain of their victory. They saw a lone, cornered woman. They did not see the billion souls standing with her. Elara knew she could not outrun them. She could not fight them physically. She had only one weapon, the universe inside her head. In the split second before they reached her, she did the one thing they did not expect. Instead of trying to shield her thoughts, to quiet her mental signature, she opened the floodgates. She didn't broadcast a thought of anger or fear. She didn't broadcast a complex equation. She reached into the deepest part of the archivist library, to the memory of their own world's end, and she broadcast a single, pure, overwhelming concept, the feeling of a billion souls experiencing a shared, profound, and beautiful grief for a home that was lost forever. It was not an attack. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated emotion, an empathy bomb. The agents, their minds honed for pursuit and capture, had no defense. The wave of alien sorrow washed over them, and their professional composure shattered. The janitor stumbled back, his eyes suddenly wide with a grief he couldn't comprehend. The woman who had been pretending to read a datapad let it slip from her numb fingers, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. Their focus broke. Their net dissolved. In the midst of their stunned confusion, Elara moved. She did not run for her freighter. She ran for the station's central communications spire, a massive antenna that linked Terminus to the rest of the galaxy. She knew this was no longer about her own escape. It was about ending the hunt itself. Aboard the orbiting Inquisitor, Jocasta watched the scene unfold on her tactical display. She saw her elite agents falter, clutching their heads, lost in a sudden, inexplicable sea of sorrow. She saw Elara break free and head for the calm spire. She's using the archive as a psychic weapon. Unprecedented. Lock down the spire. And get me a direct link to her neural signature. If she wants to talk, we'll talk. Pinpoint her, now. Elara reached the access hub at the base of the calm spire, sealing the door behind her. She didn't need a console. She interfaced directly with the station's network, her mind a living quantum computer. She rerouted the primary relay, not to send a message out, but to focus its power into a single, tight beam, aimed directly at the Inquisitor in orbit. And then, she reached out with her mind, and found the cold, sharp, and hungry consciousness of Jocasta waiting for her. Their minds connected. It was not a conversation of words, but of pure intent. Elara felt the invasive probe of Jocasta's technology, a brutal, powerful attempt to hack her very consciousness. But Elara was ready. She had spent months learning from the archivists. And she knew their final, greatest secret. She didn't fight back with a wall or a weapon. She simply opened the door. Elara, she did not show Jocasta a memory, or a piece of science. She gave her what she asked for. She gave her the archive. Not the filtered data, but the raw, unfiltered, overwhelming experience of it. The consciousness of a billion souls, living for a billion years, their joys, their sorrows, their art, their philosophies, their love, their end. The sheer, magnificent, terrifying scale of a complete civilization, poured directly into the narrow, unprepared mind of a single human. On the bridge of the Inquisitor, Jocasta collapsed, her body catatonic, her eyes wide and staring at a universe she was never meant to comprehend. The psychic link shattered. The hunt was over. Days later, the freighter Comet's tail finally departed from Garrison's Point. Aboard, in a quiet cabin, Elara looked out at the stars. The news was full of the chaos at Chrysalis Corporation. Their top agent, Jocasta, had suffered a complete, inexplicable psychotic break. Their secret, ontological, research division was in shambles. They would not be hunting anyone for a very long time. Elara was finally, truly free. Her AI, Case, appeared as a hologram beside her. Your vital signs are stable, Elara. The broadcast did not permanently damage you. What is our next destination? What is your plan? Elara looked out at the endless sea of stars, the quiet library of her mind now at peace. The archivists sent their legacy across the void, hoping to find a species that could learn. Not just to learn their science, but to learn from their wisdom, from their mistakes. My plan is to learn. And then, one day, when I am ready, I will find a way to share it. Not as a weapon, or a tool, or a patent. But as it was intended. As a gift. Her journey was no longer an escape. It was a new, profound mission of her own choosing. She was the sole inheritor of a lost civilization, and she would be its worthy student, and one day, its gentle, wise teacher. She was the last archivist, and her work had just begun.